What's up guys, my name is Andy. As I continue to upgrade the ignition system on my 68 F100, the next thing I want to do was the coil. Now I'm pairing this coil with the electronic ignition that I installed in a previous video. And the reason why you want to pair them is Pertronix has three different igniter series, 1, 2, and 3. I have the igniter 1 inside my distributor cap here, so I want to match it with the appropriate coil that goes with the igniter 1 series. And that's this guy right here. Normally this is an incredibly easy install. It's just 3 wires, right? You've got the positive and negative terminals on the top of the coil, and then the coil wire that goes to the distributor. In this case, I have a holder that's mounted to my block, so I slide it in there and away you go. And normally you'd be done, and this would be an incredibly short video because of how simple this is. But what I need to do is address something that I didn't do in the video where I installed the electronic ignition. The important thing that I did not point out is that igniter in here, this needs a 12-volt source. Now, on these Ford, there's a lot of cars that have ballast resistors or resistor wire, and this particular truck has that pink resistor wire that's common for the late 60s Fords. It's cutting the voltage down to around 6 volts or so. And the one way you can tell if you have that is you can put a multimeter on the positive terminal of the coil and then just a regular ground and turn the key to the on ignition, and you'll see if you have 6 volts or 6 to 9 volts reading at the coil before you even turn the truck on. That's your giveaway that you have a ballast resistor, in this case the pink wire resistor, and that's cutting the voltage to my ignition system. The truck will run, it does run, but eventually I'm going to burn that system up and it's going to void the warranty. And I didn't talk about that in that video where I installed that electronic ignition. I need to fix that. That was something that I should have done. I want to fix it now. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to feed this its own 12-volt source, and I'm going to do it using a relay, but I'll cover a couple different ways you can do that. We're going to get that all set up and hooked up. Then I'm going to put this coil in, which again, this is incredibly easy to do, but let's get this dedicated 12-volt source to my electronic ignition first, then we'll put this guy in. So there are several places that you can get a 12-volt source, and we want that 12-volt source to be hot when the car is on, not when the car is off. So obviously just coming off of the battery isn't going to work. What I'm going to do is use a relay where I'm going to tap into stuff on this starter solenoid, but there's places under the dash that you can also pull a 12-volt source from. One good place is if you have something like one of these little splitter guys underneath here. In fact, I recently did that with installing the TAC in my truck here. I found there was an open port here, and this is an accessory 12-volt source that's on when the car is on, and I use that to power the TAC. You could tap into that. That wouldn't be a problem. You can also use the fuse box and find, one of these circuits that is only on when the car is on, and you can tap into that. Again, there's several places that you can find a 12-volt source, but the important thing is that what we want to do is have a dedicated 12-volt source only when the truck is on. So it's tough to say which way is the right way for you. Some people want to go the cheap and easy route. Some people just want to tap into something simple. I like using relays. It's a dedicated circuit. I can isolate things. For example, if I was to pull off of the power off of the fuse box, I want to make sure I'm on the back side of the fuse so I could use that fuse to be the interrupt for the 12-volt source in case something were to happen. But if that fuse were to blow for some other reason, your car won't start or your truck won't start because you're pulling power there. I'm going to use a relay that's going to pull power off of the battery, but it's going to be triggered by a source that is on when the car is on. This is something that, again, I like to isolate my circuits. I like to have dedicated circuits. When I rewire the truck, I'll be able to set this up and I won't need to worry about that. But for now, I'm kind of, and like a lot of you guys, you're using the wiring that's there from the previous owner, and you just saw underneath the dash there's some newer wires and some older wires, and I can tell that somebody's been in there and messed with some things. Whether they improved it or not is anybody's guess, but the nice thing about what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my own setup. I'm going to know how it's wired. I'm going to know that it's going to be dedicated 12-volt source, and I'm going to be good to go. Let's take a look at that wiring diagram real quick for that relay, and I'll show you how to set that up. So what I've got here is just your standard 5-pin automotive relay. This is a 40 amp 12-volt setup, and it's nice because it comes with this harness, and I could just plug things right in. You can get little connectors that can connect onto here. The important thing is that the relay has the terminals labeled because you're going to use that here in a second. But because I have one of these harnesses, it's already ready to go. It's simple, it's got some leads on it. I can just tap into those, and then I can mount this on the truck, and everything's nice and clean. If I ever need to replace this relay, I still have that harness in place, and I can replace the relay. So how are we going to wire this up? And that's where something like this diagram comes into place. What I've got here is I'm going to tap off of the I terminal on the starter solenoid. This terminal is hot only when the car is on. It doesn't matter the voltage, it needs to be like 1.5, 2 volts at a minimum to power this relay. We're gonna get 12 volts there. And you could make the argument that you could just run off of this terminal straight to the coil, because this wire does go to the coil in the truck, but there's also that resistor wire, it's tapped into there, and I'm just gonna bypass all that stuff. I'm gonna use that terminal to trigger my relay. And what I've got here, again, I've got the wire colors that go with this particular relay. I don't know if these are standard colors for these terminals, but I bought a package of these relays, and I've had several of them I've used on my vehicles over the years. And I've got these wires color coded here to go with the terminals that we need to do. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take this yellow wire, we're gonna come off that I terminal on the starter solenoid, we're gonna go to terminal 86, and then we're gonna come out this white wire to the ground. And I can just put a little ring terminal in here, and actually just, because I'm gonna just screw this to the fender, and I can just use this ground as the same screw that's gonna hold this in place. That's what that will look like. And I'm gonna use the black wire and come off of the battery side of the starter solenoid, put a fuse in line, and I'm gonna come into the relay, and it's gonna, because this is a normally open relay, I don't need this blue wire because that circuit there is closed, and that is actually going to be powered when the relay is just sitting there. I don't want to use that wire, that's why I got it crossed out. But I do want number 87 terminal to go to the coil. And I'll just run a wire from here all the way, I'm going to run it through the firewall and then come back out and tap it up into the coil. This is your standard relay layout, and the important thing is the terminals are labeled on here in case you guys have different wire colors. But this is a very basic setup, and this will get triggered when the car turns on, that terminal gets active, it's gonna trigger the coil inside of the relay, it's gonna send power to the coil, and it'll be on as long as the truck is on. When I turn the key off, power to that terminal goes off, disengages the relay, I don't have power to the coil, which is exactly what we're looking for. So let me get this set up real quick, I'll get everything all kind of tucked in here and wired in, and then we can get it in the truck. All right, here is the finished product. I got the fuse holder in place, so I'm just gonna put one of these blade style. This is a 15 amp fuse. A 10 amp fuse would be sufficient, but this is all I had. Put one of those in there. This is gonna go to the I terminal. This wire I'm gonna connect to the longer wire. They're gonna run out to the coil. This is the ground. So I've got everything ready to go. I can get this installed in the truck and get everything going from there. I'm gonna put it somewhere kind of in here like that. And this guy can come around and tap onto that battery terminal. This guy will come down and get to that. This is the ground. We can loop this back around for the mount screw there. And this guy, we're gonna run out into the firewall and can come back over by the coil. So I think this is something pretty good. I don't wanna be in the way of this as it comes down. There's lots of room to mount stuff on here. I could mount it a little bit lower. It'll probably be all right. I think we'll put it right here. This isn't gonna hurt anything. I'm just gonna drill a hole in the fender here. We can drill a screw for a screw, and there you go. All right, now that we got that relay installed, everything's connected to where it needs to go. I ran that wire, the red wire, up into the firewall. It goes above the heater inside the cab, and it comes out right over here, right the same place where the wiring came out for the tack that I just done that video on. And we've got that lead sitting right here, it's ready to go. And normally you would just connect to the coil right here, and then we'd be done, except I'm gonna be replacing the coil. That's the whole point of this video, was to replace this coil, upgrade it to the Protronics unit to go with the electronic ignition. So let's take this guy off, and we'll get this connected to it and show you how simple that is. All right, we're just gonna use a 9/16 socket to take this bolt out. It's holding this coil to the intake manifold. Oh, don't lose that. All right, and then from here, we can pull the top of the coil plug wire off, and then I'm gonna be putting the negative terminal wires back on there. The two wires that are connected here, they're gonna go back onto the negative terminal on the new coil. And on this side, this is the positive side, this red wire goes to the electronic ignition, but this green wire with the red stripe is a wire we're no longer gonna use. We're gonna replace it with that new one that we just created, this guy right here, and we're gonna replace that wire with that. And see, we've got this labeled on here, positive and negative side. So actually, I'm gonna wanna flip it around this way so I won't see the sticker for the flamethrower, but that's okay, that's not gonna hurt anything. And we'll just do one side at a time, that way we won't mix anything up. We're gonna use the red wire that was on there before, but not this green wire with the red stripe. For now, I'm just gonna tape this off. I'm gonna rewire the truck eventually, so I'll eliminate this wire altogether, but for now I can just put a piece of tape over it. It's not hurting anything to leave it there, but we do want the new wire that we created to go with the red wire that goes to electronic ignition, all on the positive terminal. There, that stuff's ready to go. Tape off this old wire. We'll just tuck it in down here for now, it's not gonna hurt anything. Now I need this bracket that was on here. And this might be a little bit of a pain depending on if yours is ruined or whatever, but we're just gonna loosen this screw up and this should just slide right off and we can slide it onto the new one. We'll put this tag back on here. And then the last thing we don't want to forget is the coil wire. All right, everything's hooked up. The last thing I need to do is we need to finish we got to put this wire back on here on the I terminal. We need to put the fuse in there. And then what I want to do is I'm going to test that terminal and make sure we're getting 12 volts. Then we're going to fire the truck up. All right. I mean, that's close enough, 12 volts. That's a heck of a lot better than we had before. We have like, what, 6.71 or something like that before, so much better. All right, let's fire up the truck. Clear prop. All right, simple install. Again, the coil itself by itself is really easy. It's just swapping out those terminals and then there you go. The big thing was that I wanted to correct what I had done with that electronic ignition by not giving it its own 12 volt source, and I think we've accomplished that. Got the relay in there, got it wired up so that it looks presentable, right? We don't just have wires everywhere. It takes a little extra time, but I think it's worth it. And those relays, particularly ones that come with that harness, they're pretty cheap. You can buy a bundle of them and you're gonna use them, you know, over the course of having these cars and trucks. So again, simple install, not much to it, and I'm happy. Yeah, just as we continue to upgrade this truck and keep things going, I'm happy with it. All right guys, if you liked the video, give me a thumbs up. And if you subscribe, I appreciate it because it helps my channel out, and we'll see you in the next one.